Over a universe wrapped in the gloom of a dense and primeval night, passed the god Huracan, the mighty wind. He called out, "Earth," and the solid land appeared. The chief gods took counsel. They were Huracan, Gukumats, the serpent covered with green feathers, Ishpiakak, and Ishmukane, the mother and father gods. As the result of their deliberations, animals were created. But as yet, man was not. To supply the deficiency, the divine beings resolved to create mannequins carved out of wood. But these soon incurred the displeasure of the gods, who, irritated by their lack of reverence, resolved to destroy them. Then, by the will of Huracan, the heart of heaven, the waters were swollen, and a great flood came upon the mannequins of wood. They were drowned, and a thick resin fell from heaven. The bird, Ishkotovach, tore out their eyes. The bird, Kamulats, cut off their heads. The bird, Kotzbalam, devoured their flesh. And finally the bird, Tekumbalam, broke their bones and sinews and ground them into powder. Because they had not thought on Huracan. Therefore the face of the earth grew dark, and a pouring rain commenced, raining by day, raining by night. Then all sorts of beings, great and small, gathered together to abuse the men to their faces. The very household utensils and animals jeered at them. Their millstones, their plates, their cups, their dogs, their hens. Said the dogs and hens, "Very badly have you treated us, and you have bitten us. Now we bite you in turn." For your people, the classical era of the Mayans between 250 and 900 CE was a golden age. It saw an explosion of art, architecture, agriculture, writing, and mathematics across magnificently built cities peppering the low and highlands of the Yucatan Peninsula. Each city, much like the city-states of the ancient Greeks, hosted a dense population and amazing variety of buildings. Unlike the Greek city-states, the range of architecture for the Mayans included magnificent step pyramids for a variety of civil functions. Ruling each of these was a king who believed himself, as did your people, that he ruled with divine rights and acted as a mediator between your people and the realm of the supernatural. The kingship was patrilineal, with the eldest son gaining the throne upon their father's death, a throne you all believed had a place among the gods you worshipped. You are Jaguar Fang, the eldest of your parents' 3 sons. You were born and raised in the city-state of Tikal, near where the Mayan Lowlands and highlands meet. Your family lives near the city's southern edge, alongside the perimeter of the dense, vast jungle forest. You and your brothers have been learning the art of stone carving from your father, who had learned from his. This has afforded your family with prestige and stature in Tikal. For centuries, your ancestors had hunted the forests and tended the lands of Tikal. Your people also grow corn, beans, and squash under the watchful gaze of the god Hunelye, whose name means the one revealed sprouting. To an outsider looking in, it becomes quickly apparent how much value the Mayans placed on corn. The most common visual portrayal of the above-mentioned god Hunelye was with corn in hand, and usually accompanied by another god, the young maize god, whose head was portrayed as an ear of corn. While agricultural prowess was a significant factor in the growth of Mayan civilization during this golden age, your people still had strong ties to the jungle as a source of life-giving sustenance. Today is a special day. You, your brothers, and father have entered the jungle just as night is falling to hunt. First, though, the Mayan tradition of Lujil Tsun, or Carbine Ceremony, the ceremony being part offering and part permission as well as cleansing, To ensure being able to hear the spirits clearly, your group has taken the appropriate amount of dried sacred mushrooms. An adorned table with seating for gods and animal lords stands before your small group. It's covered with offerings, and at its center, a large squash-style pot. It simmers with a foamy orange broth containing deer and peccary meat, as well as a type of tortilla called the pinkuch, and a smattering of diced male turkey brains and livers. The turkey, a domesticated animal of your people, is the link offering between the tamed world of your people and the wild world of the hunt. Spicing this stew, 13 different types of dried peppers. This is the sip soup, which is the most important offering, and it's made for the spirit evil wind, the deity that will dictate ultimately the success of the hunt, as wind and the carrying away or to of scents is vital to the hunt. Your father lifts the pot as your group begins to pray. The words come naturally to your lips, and in unison the words ring out. Lord of the animals, take this turkey that we have tamed from your wild herd. In exchange, we ask for permission to harvest wild things. The sip is the most important part of the ritual. It is the act that frees the spirit of the turkey back into the wild spiritual realm. If he screeches, then the offering is deemed not accepted, and instead punishment will be sent your way. The silence as your group sips is a good omen that the hunt has been accepted. However, the final act of the ceremony is to return a part of your future prey as the final offering to conclude the ritual. After your group has sipped the pot, it's returned to the table and you prepare for the early morning hunt. As dawn nears, your group sets off. It's always amazed you how effortlessly your father could glide through the jungle, his double-thonged sandals making no noise as he moved against the wind spirits. You were fairly adept at hunting, but your father was able to pick up on signs even you missed, and rarely would he come home empty-handed. It was an honor to hunt alongside him with your brothers, always learning something even after having already hunted with him for over 15 hab. You were armed with a blowgun. Over your shoulder you carry a small sack of clay pellets. While your father and middle brother focused on deer, you and the youngest would be looking for pheasants and any smaller animals that you could spot. You and your brother had cleansed yourselves prior to the hunt. The objective, to have as close to no smell as possible. One of the first things that you had learned about hunting as a young child was to cleanse yourself before any hunt. Your father had said that no matter how quietly you move through the forest, the sounds a strong smell make to the animals is always the loudest. Your youngest brother, T-Jax, which means flint knife, as he was named for the only knife that could cut his spirit cord at birth, you are taking him for smaller prey as an opportunity to teach him how to hunt. And as you walk deeper into the forest, the dense growth darkens all around you both. You explain to T-Jax that in the absence of light under the thick forest canopy, you must rely on sound. And as you rely on sound, so do the animals. Particularly those who get hunted most by others. They know the sounds of those who hunt them and whisper it amongst their kind. The familiar rhythm of your stride must be changed, you tell him, so that the animals cannot tell it is us. You show him carefully how to take quick, small steps while keeping your footfalls as light as possible. Your brother comments that you sound like the squirrels he recently started learning to hunt. Exactly, you reply, and you go on to ask him, does the deer or pheasant fear the squirrel? No, replies your brother. You nod in agreement and say, that is how we will get closer. Also, can you tell me which way the wind is blowing? Towards us, he replies. Yet again you nod in the affirmative and say, "It is not enough to sound like a squirrel, brother. We must also keep our smell quiet and ensure the wind spirits are moving towards us as we close in." By mid-morning, your group converges near the altar table with the proceeds of a successful hunt. You have all been successful and make the appropriate offerings to the animal lords and other gods before setting off for home. Your land and home on the outskirts of Tikal, yet still within view of the city center. Magnificent stone buildings that rise from the former jungle floor to much higher than the surrounding jungle canopy around it. This evening's meal would likely be one of the last for some time, for in the morning you were to set off for the city of Palenque in the highlands, long an allied city with Tikal. Their new ruler, Pakal, has summoned you and other stone carvers from allied cities to celebrate the occasion of his wedding. Your satchels packed, you and your brothers, who've also been invited to represent your father's particular style of carving, set off. Unfortunately, your father is unable to make the trip, having obligations that require him to stay behind in the city. You and your brothers set off on the main Zakbi that bisects the city towards its western exit. Much of the forest around your city has been harvested for its wood, leaving large, open areas devoid of trees. Many have been converted to farmland, but the harvests from these pieces of land never as bountiful as the areas where no trees grew prior. In a few hours, you leave the environs of your city and enter the wild lands beyond. In the distance, you see the terrain slowly transition to the higher lands. Palenque had long been ruled by Mayan Queens, something quite unusual for your people. The last queen was the mother of Pakal, who now held the throne. She had watched it until he reached the age of maturity. Pakal was now 23 Hab and marrying Zakbua Jau. She related to the Tokten dynasty who had once ruled Palenque. As the hours pass and the terrain slowly begins to elevate, your group breaks out in song. You and your brothers love to sing epic songs dealing with the creation of your people. After several more days of travel, you cross fully into the highlands near the city of Pomona. Pomona, famed among your people for its stone carvings, many of them would also be at the wedding ceremony. You continue traversing through the elevating terrain, and then the sickening smell hits you. The unmistakable gut-wrenching smell of burning human flesh. A few minutes later, a thick black smoke is spotted rising above the trees on the horizon. Your group picks up its pace, and then you come across groups of families heading towards you in panic. You signal to them with the common gestures indicating you mean no harm. The fear on their faces is obvious, and they tell you why they are fleeing Pomona. They had been attacked by the Toninians, mutual enemies of your people, and the Palenquins. The Toninians had attacked them in the hours just before dawn and killed all they came across, women, children, and of course men indiscriminately. You and your brothers offer what assistance you can in the way of food and water, and then stop to discuss your next steps. Do you continue to pass through Pomona as planned, offering what assistance you can, or do you steer clear in case war parties are still present? Find out in the next installment of this series. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like, and if you've dropped by to watch a few videos and like what you see, please consider subscribing. Till the next video, and as always, cheers.